When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Escape Cancelo, oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah, oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty!
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans!
De Bruyne! And it is Wood-Prowse! Martinelli, gorgeous! Still going up! Oh, he's done it again!
And City have won the Premier League!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tadiwa Chanakira.
And we're back. Welcome to another episode of A Tad Predictable, the post-season edition, where we are running through all of the EPL teams for the 24-25 Premier League season. And it's starting to get to that point where it's starting to feel like football truly is back. When you start seeing pre-season games, when you start seeing videos of a lot more of the players that were playing on international duty arriving at the various training centers and training grounds all around the world, wherever all of these teams are touring, it really is starting to feel like the season is going to be starting very, very soon. And of course, we are entering August, so it is going to be very, very soon. And I'm sure many people cannot wait. I guess it depends how your team ended last season, how they're going in the transfer window. Maybe that sways whether or not you're excited for the next season or you're dreading it and already waiting for the next summer window. But today we're going to be talking about Manchester United Football Club. Obviously, yesterday we spoke about Manchester City as we have been going in alphabetical order. I won't rehash my thoughts on my positions with regards to them and the asterisks that must be on their legacy until their legal issues are resolved. But from a Man United perspective, they were the benchmark from a financial standpoint, from a revenue generating standpoint. They were the biggest club in English football. And they've seen that gap slowly erode, and they've started to be overtaken by the likes of a Manchester City. And again, put an asterisk on that one. But it seems like since Sir Alex Ferguson left Man United, it's been a downturn. We know famously many Man United past players, Man United fans were confident that this would never happen to Man United, that they were too big to struggle in the way that they have struggled over the last couple of seasons, or it's now been quite a while since Sir Alex Ferguson left. And I'm sure they've eaten some humble pie and are hoping that these new owners are going to be owners that are spearheading them back to the top of the Premier League, or at least in the conversation for the top of the Premier League. And I say new in the sense that it's not like it's a complete takeover, is it? But obviously Sir Jim Ratcliffe, he was officially announced as Man United's new co-owner back in February 2024, so earlier on this year. He purchased a 25% stake in the club for about 1.3 billion. He then invested a further 200 million to take his ownership share to approximately 27.7, according to a club statement that was made. So he seems to be, fully invested, if we can call it that, at Man United. And then obviously, although the Glazer family still holds a majority stake of Man United, Ratcliffe's INEOS group have been put in charge of football operations. And that's probably the key thing for Man United fans is, okay, yes, the Glazers might still own us, but at least there's someone else that is taking over the football operations. And obviously, we've seen changes already. We've seen Dan Ashworth obviously be announced, and on the 1st of July rather, he was cleared to start working at Man United as their new sporting director. He obviously had been at Newcastle, and he was on gardening leave since about February, the time of the announcement from Sir Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS. So it is interesting. Obviously, he comes by the way of Brighton, and we saw what Brighton have done in previous seasons in terms of identifying gems from all around the world. So we'll see what impact that will have on Manchester United. But let's sort of rewind things a little bit before we obviously get too excited about Manchester United going forward. We need to take a look at what happened to them last season. As I've mentioned, it's not been great since Alex Ferguson left. And look, they won a trophy, right? They won the FA Cup, but the question is that enough for Man United? Is an FA Cup enough to hold fort, so to speak, in a season? I would assume not, based on the pedigree that they've had over the last couple of years, based on the history, the competition, the rivalry that they have with Liverpool in terms of trying to one up each other and be the most dominant team in English football in terms of trophies. I think there's certain trophies that hold more weight than others, personally, and I'm sure they would also feel that same way, and I'm sure they're desperate to get back to challenging for the Premier League and the Champions League. But nonetheless, they still end up doing the business when it came to the FA Cup, and a huge congratulations to them. They beat Man City 2-1 in the final. Obviously, we had that Garnacho goal, and then Kobe Mainoo in a breakout season. I guess we call that a breakout season. He obviously got the winning goal in the 39th minute, and they went on to win that 2-1, as I've mentioned. But in the Carabao Cup, they went out in the fourth round, which is one round after they joined. They lost to Newcastle in that one. In the Champions League, it wasn't good. They finished last in their group on 4 points. They won one game. It was at home to Copenhagen. They then lost to Copenhagen away, drew to Galatasaray away, and the rest of the games they lost. So, yeah, a win and a draw, those being a win at home to Copenhagen, a 1-0 win at that, a Maguire goal, and then obviously the 3-3 draw at Galatasaray. I'm sure Man United fans would have been bitterly disappointed with their showing in the Champions League. But I don't think they were a Champions League caliber team. I don't think they were ready for the Champions League. And I'm sure Man United fans won't like a Liverpool fan saying that, but it's the truth. They just do not have a squad that was ready to make any sort of statement in the Champions League. And then obviously it bore fruit in terms of the results that they had. With regards to the league, the Premier League, that is, they end up finishing 8th. That means they are qualified, but obviously they won the FA Cup. But anyway, they've now qualified for the Europa League for next season, so we will see how they fare there. But yeah, an 8th place finish on 60 points, which was level on points with Newcastle. But more worryingly for Man United, the arguably the most worrying thing from last season is they ended the Premier League season on -1 goal difference, 57 goals scored, 58 conceded. Until they address that situation, it's not going to be pretty for Man United for a while. And we will see. Obviously, they've made signings. They've tried to be aggressive in this transfer window, and we'll assess some of those signings a bit later on in this show. But what I do want to kick off with is obviously this thing of post Sir Alex Ferguson. I personally think Sir Alex Ferguson did the selfish thing of trying to finish on top So, which meant signing, for example, an aging, injury-prone Robin van Persie, who didn't have longevity in that Man United team. Stuff like that, where he wasn't looking after Man United from a long-term project. He wasn't looking after the person that was going to take care of the club after he left. He was just trying to win as many trophies as he could on the way out, and then, hey, that it's on you, Man United, afterwards. We've seen, for example, an Arsene Wenger who could have left Arsenal in a worse situation than he ended up then being forced to leave Arsenal in. He stayed to try and fix things at a time where he could have gone to Real Madrid. He chose to rather stay at Arsenal and try and fix things. We've seen it with Jurgen Klopp, obviously the poor season, the season before. He then stayed and tried to address that and try and fix it. Last season, he bled in a lot of young players last season, again, trying to lay the foundations down for Arne Slot when he picks up the baton. We'll see what that happens then. Obviously, Klopp knew he was going to be leaving and told the owners he was going to be leaving back in around October, November time. So he was another one that could have left after the previous season, the 22-23 season, but chose to stay because he needed to address some things. I think he did that extra year just to give them just to try and course correct some of the damage that was done in the previous season. And then, okay, now I can leave Liverpool in a bit more of a positive light. So again, another manager that has chosen after an extended period of time at a club to rather try and leave the club in the best possible shape for the next for the next manager. One, I don't think Sir Alex Ferguson did that. As I said, if you go look at the squad that he left, it was an aging squad. There wasn't much in terms of player development, young player development, and there wasn't a lot of resale value to be able to recoup some money to then go and create another squad. I thought it was poor form from him on that perspective. But again, these things you always have to mention alongside them. It doesn't take away from his legacy. He's still arguably the greatest manager in English football history. I think if people actually went and did their research in history, they would realize that there are other managers that actually did the business, the likes of Bob Paisley, that actually went and won more dominant fashion. And anyway, you go do your research. I'm not going to do your research for it. You guys, go before you do your research. The first thing you should research is go research Paul Heyman's WWE Hall of Fame speech, and you'll and the famous phrase he put there. Obviously, I'm not going to cuss on this podcast, but what he said there, I echo it. Go research, but yeah, go research what Bob Paisley did at Liverpool back in the day. That to me is the greatest manager in English football history. But obviously Sir Alex Ferguson is there in that conversation, and for many he is seen as the benchmark when it comes to judging managers. And obviously because he's done it more recently and lots of people wouldn't have seen the Paisley era, that's probably why he edges it for a lot of people. But him also choosing, whether it was him that chose, it was certainly him that announced it, him choosing David Moyes to succeed him, again, I'm skeptical of that decision. Moyes wasn't ready for a Man United job. Certainly not a Man United job with that many strong aging characters who wouldn't want to be ushered out of the team because they are strong aging egos in the locker room. Like it was never going to work for Man United bringing in David Moyes into that situation. That I think from Sir Alex Ferguson, that was a poor appointment. And I'm the cynic in me wonders if he did it on purpose, just so Man United fans would miss him more, just so it would solidify his legacy a little bit more. Because if the new manager comes in and does the exact same thing that he was doing, continues winning trophies, I think it takes a little bit of the shine, a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit of the shine off of the Sir Alex Ferguson mystique. But if he leaves and then the club just goes into disarray, obviously it elevates his status, it elevates his legacy. And as I said, it's the cynic in me, but that's how I think maybe there's an element of that in this. But anyway, let's focus on last season as we've done. Let's focus on this coming season. Let's focus on this transfer window, because boy, oh boy, have Man United come into this one with an interesting approach to things. Now, in the past, we've seen Man United spend money more as a publicity stunt than a functionality stunt perspective. They'll buy players who get the headlines but don't actually address some of the problems that they have. They'll bring back a Cristiano Ronaldo just so he doesn't end up at Man City, coming into a Man United team that doesn't suit the style of football that he's going to want to play at his age. But you know, we have to bring him in because it's a headline signing. They'll sign a Bastian Schweinsteiger who's well past his best, but again, it's because we're signing Bastian Schweinsteiger. They'll sign an Angel Di Maria when he's clearly no longer the Angel Di Maria that we knew and loved, just because it's a big name. They'll sign a Varane when Varane had already done everything he needed to do in football at Real Madrid. There was no motivation for Varane in football, and you saw it when he came to Man United. He was done. He was done with football. He didn't get anywhere near to the levels of performances from an individual perspective of where he was at Real Madrid. I just think Man United, season after season, made really weird decisions, and again, all for the name of publicity rather than functionality. And as a Liverpool fan, hey, I'm not complaining. If they're going to do that, continue doing that, and long may that continue. But as Man United fans, surely you'd be frustrated by the way that the team has spent the money. You see a lot of Man United fans complain about how the Glazers don't back the manager, and it's very much a narrative that has been driven by the likes of Gary Neville. And then you go and you actually look at things, and you actually look at how much Man United have spent, and you're like, what on earth are you talking about? Gary Neville, what are you talking about? I don't get it. How can you possibly say the Glazers have not backed the managers? If you want to talk about the infrastructure of Man United and the weird-ass stadium that they're still in, we can talk about that. We can talk about the ninth wonder of the world, that waterfall that was going on at the stadium when it's raining. We can talk about that. We can talk about the poor training facilities that they have, where Cristiano Ronaldo is coming back decades later and seeing that things are still the same. It's still the same equipment. Nothing has improved from that perspective. Yes, from that perspective, you can say the Glazers haven't spent money, but that's not what Gary Neville and all of the people that were making these complaints were initially talking about. They've turned it to that now, because obviously they've been rebutted when it comes to how much they've spent on the pitch talent. So now they've tried to finagle it by shifting the goalposts of what they were talking about. The original thing was that they're not backing them on the pitch like a Man City are backing Pep Guardiola on the pitch. And I would rebut that by saying, no, the Glazers gave Man United managers a lot of money. They just spent it really, really poorly. And again, they were signing players that were for publicity rather than functionality. And if they were being a little bit smarter in who they were signing with the money that they had, they would have assembled a far better squad than the squad that they currently have now and the issues that they currently have now. Paying for Wan-Bissaka, coming from Crystal Palace, knowing he struggles on the ball going forward. This was known before Wan-Bissaka came to Man United, that he was strong defensively, not so good going forward. You pay big money for him. He comes in, he's not good going forward, but he's good defensively. They act surprised. And it's like, what are we talking about? What is going on here? And the thing with signing like a Wan-Bissaka, I would understand that if, say, a Liverpool signed him, or at the time, let's say, an Arsene Wenger signs him, a Jurgen Klopp signs him, maybe to an extent a Pep Guardiola signs him. And the reason that I say that is because all of these managers develop players. They're very good at developing young players, and they probably could have maybe develop the attacking side of a Wan-Bissaka. But Man United are terrible at developing players. I'm sorry. If you look at Man United players that have come through in the last couple of years, yes, they've come through with some super talented players. A Rashford coming through, super talented. But Rashford has stagnated for the last 2-3 years. You see them buying an Anthony Martial, who was Kylian Mbappe before Kylian Mbappe was Kylian Mbappe. He stagnated horribly at Man United. Remember when Anthony came in? Anthony Martial came into Man United. He was the hottest property, the biggest prospect, the Wunderkind, if you want to call it that. And he stagnated horribly. You look at, I could go through a plethora of players that have come through at Man United, young players that, yes, because of their talent and because they're growing up, obviously they're going to get better. There is that natural progression that happens with age, right? And with the talent that you have. But in terms of player development, really pulling out everything you can from that player, really shining up that gem, I don't see it at a Man United. Garnacho, for example, very exciting player, but can he become a consistent week in, week out player that you rely on to get you goals and assists? We will see. We will see whether Man United can do that. But yes, he'll pop up on Match of the Day every now and then, and people will say, we'll use that as an example of, no, Man United do develop players. We will see. Let's wait and see if they can become consistent players. Because one thing a Klopp does, one thing an Arsene Wenger does, one thing a Pep Guardiola does is those players, when they come through, like a Phil Foden, for example, same example as like a Rashford coming through or a Garnacho coming through. Phil Foden coming through, we all, many people, I'm not going to say we all could because some people didn't, but many people could see this is a talented boy. But okay, talent only gets you so far, especially in the professional game, right? Especially in the elite level of the professional game. Talent can only get you so far. Now you still have to be talented whilst implementing the manager's tactics that he wants to bring in. Or, you've got to now be able to adapt your game to different tactical styles and still be as impactful as you were when you were the young player coming in and weren't given that many tactical instructions and sort of just allowed to use your youthful exuberance during games. That's a development phase that happens. Then also, you have to be consistent. Can you deliver that week in, week out? Give those levels of performances. We started to see that from a Phil Foden. Will we ever see that from a Garnacho? We've certainly not seen it from a Rashford. Has Rashford ever had an entire season where he's consistent? He's had patches. He's had really, really good patches of seasons where he's been really good and really hot. And you're thinking this is, one of the best players in the Premier League. But not for an extended period of time, in the sense of not from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. This is the level that Rashford is at. He's going to give you minimum a 7 out of 10, and he's going to sprinkle in a whole lot of 10 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, and 8 out of 10s. Because that's what we see from a Phil Foden, who's a lot younger. That's what we see from a Mohamed Salah. That's what we see from a Kevin De Bruyne. That's what we see from these elite players. Name me a Man United player that has been able to do that. We'd look at maybe Bruno Fernandes is probably the one that you would identify as someone that's being consistent and able to perform at a high level at a consistent rate. But again, this is not a player Man United developed. This is a player that Man United bought, already developed by Sporting Lisbon. So let's get that right first and foremost. So yeah, I think the issue for me with Man United and we'll get to with regards to their transfer window and what they've done so far is, have they addressed that situation? Have they addressed their inability to develop talent and elevate the talent that comes in? Because if they haven't addressed that, this window is not as good as some Man United fans are trying to make it out to be, whether or not they want to believe stories that Euro chose Real Madrid over them. We will get to that as well. It's a weird situation for Man United. And the thing is, Man United are so financially powerful that if they get it right, everyone needs to be worried. If Man United put the structures in place they need to, sort out their infrastructure first and foremost, the training center needs redevelopment, the stadium needs redevelopment, and whatever else that needs redevelopment. Okay, that's one thing. We can put that to one side, right? If Man United can start, sorting out their talent identification, sorting out their squad planning a lot better than what it currently is, why are you buying 50 players that like to play on the left wing that are right-footed and want to cut in, and not buying right wingers? It just doesn't make sense. Like, some of the stuff that they do just doesn't make sense. Anyway, so if Man United can sort out their squad planning and actually get that going at an actually like a decent level, I'm not talking mid-table level, I'm talking top 6 level caliber of squad planning in the Premier League, Man United could shoot up the Premier League really, really quickly because they're so financially dominant. They are the biggest team in English football from a revenue standpoint. Obviously, Liverpool have caught up to them now, and the argument can be made whether or not they caught up. Again, City, some will say City have overtaken them. There's an asterisk there for me, so I won't include them in the conversation just yet. But it would be very easy for Man United to get back into contention, get back into title races year in, year out, if they can just start fixing things. And I'm sure for Man United fans, the hope is that under this new era of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS, that this is the change. This is when they're going to start to see this. And if it is, I'm putting the rest of the league on notice, because you better get your act together, because Man United will come bulldozing into that top 4, top 3, top 2, top 1 conversation really, really quickly. And some teams might not be ready for it. And if you're a team that's currently, if you're a Spurs, for example, you're hoping Man United extend this poor management of their squad for a little bit longer, until you get your feet under you, until Ange gets his feet under him and can build a squad that can emulate what he wants done on the pitch, and all of that stuff. But we will get to a Tottenham podcast a bit later on, probably later next week, if all things work out. But yeah, so from my perspective, I think Man United are a sleeping giant, and until I've seen evidence of a full-on change in squad planning, where they're actually buying players for functionality rather than publicity, I'm not too worried about them, if I'm being honest. I don't think they're going to be challenging next season for the title. Certainly not, based on what they've done so far this window. Obviously, the big thing that they did do this window was re-signing Erik ten Hag, or extending Erik ten Hag's contract. Now, there was a lot of controversy. They end up winning the FA Cup, even when they won the FA Cup. Almost the weekend before they played the FA Cup, there was talk of Erik ten Hag was going to be sacked, that Man United were going to be going in a different direction. That must have been an awkward conversation at the celebration party after Erik ten Hag had won the FA Cup for some of the Man United suits upstairs. But yeah, anyway, they end up re-signing him. He stays. Again, as I said, it seemed like they were flirting with a lot of other managers. Whether or not that was just to gauge what they had in Erik ten Hag, or if it was a genuine attempt to see if they can get someone better than ten Hag, and if so, they would bring them in. That I don't think would ever be disclosed fully. I think it's fair that ten Hag kept the job. I guess it's the equivalent of, if you do an okay job, you keep the shirt in a starting 11. He's done an okay job. Like I said, they've won trophies every year that he's been there. It may not be the biggest trophies, but they've won trophies. You can't argue with that. And he would say, as he did say after the FA Cup final, he suffered a lot of injuries last season, and if not for those injuries, they probably would have finished a lot higher in the league. I'm not sure they would have finished a lot higher in the league personally, but yeah, I could see them having finished ahead of some of the other teams that were in and around them. But again, you can't give an excuse for one team and not level the playing field for all the other teams. So if you're Man United saying, oh, if it wasn't for our injuries, we would be higher up the table, then you have to also then take away all the injuries that Newcastle had, because they had a poor run of injuries. Remember when they just kept getting centre-back after centre-back that kept falling down, defender after defender kept getting injured. Remember them losing their number one goalkeeper for quite a long spell of time. So you can't say, you can't just look at Man United's injuries and try and remove those in isolation. You have to go and remove all the injuries of all the other teams in and around you and say, okay, fine. If we all had a full foot squad, would you have gotten higher up the table? I don't know. I don't know if Man United would have. I think 8th, 7th, 6th, that sort of range is kind of what Man United were last season. And as I said, I'm sure they're looking to address that this season. And speaking of that, we're going to go into sort of the business that they've done so far, the business I think they probably still need to do, and what their aspirations should be for next season and maybe over the next couple of seasons. But before we do that, I just want to implore you guys to go and check out Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a presenting sponsor of this podcast in association with EPLindex.com. Liberty Shield is a virtual private network. You can find their services at libertyshield.com. You guys can save with the coupon code EPL25. That will give you either 25% off of the router or the software VPN. That software VPN downloads straight onto your devices. You can use it on multiple devices as well, which is really, really cool. It unlocks geo-locked content, especially now during the Olympics. If you're a British expat and you want to have BBC iPlayer, definitely link up with Liberty Shield and let them know you heard about them from us. That stuff really does help us and it helps them, which is awesome. We're going to take a short break. We'll have a look at what Man United have done so far this season. We'll look at what they still need to do, and then we'll look at what aspirations they can have this season and heading into the next couple of seasons under this new era of football operations being run by Sir Jim Ratcliffe's team. But we will be right back after this short break.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
All right, we are back. We're talking Man United. I was a bit scathing about, I seem to be scathing these last couple of teams. Maybe it's the big teams. Maybe I'm being very harsh on the big teams. I don't know. But yeah, quite scathing on Sir Alex. I thought he left Man United in a very poor situation. Scathing of Man United's approach to signings over the recent seasons, where they signed the glitz and the glamour rather than functional players that actually would benefit their team and would help their team progress, or them signing multiple players for the same position, like the 500 players that can all play on, or that all want to play on the left, and cutting in onto their right foot is quite hilarious if you're a Liverpool fan. Obviously, not so much if you're a Man United fan, and I'm sure they're hoping that Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his team can address some of those issues. But yeah, they've tried to start addressing things. Obviously, I mentioned Dan Ashworth has come in from Newcastle via Brighton. His gardening leave obviously was from February 2024 until the 1st of July, when it was announced that, when he was confirmed as the sporting director for Man United. In terms of signings so far, we've seen the likes of Lenny Euro come in, the 18-year-old French centre-back from Lille. We've seen Joshua Zirkzee come in from Bologna for a reported £40-odd million. Obviously, Jadon Sancho comes back from his loan spell at Dortmund. Then you obviously had a couple of players that were coming back from their loans as well. But a lot of those players that were coming back from their loans have been shipped out again. A lot of them being transfers out. We've seen Donny van der Beek has finally left Man United. I mean, there's another signing that was a complete waste of money if you're Manchester United. I mean, it's just crazy. Absolutely crazy. Rafael Varane, he leaves on a free transfer. Anthony Martial, he leaves on a free transfer. He's still not with it. He still hasn't found a club. Obviously, Sofyan Amrabat heads back to Fiorentina after his loan ended. Obviously, there are other players in Man United that got sold. There's one player that plays up front for Man United, a player that came up in the academy. I don't want to talk about him. I don't have to talk about him. That's the beauty of having my own podcast. I have no desire to talk about him. He's no longer playing at Man United. It's the same with, the Arsenal midfielder. That I don't want to talk about that player. No, I'm good. Anyway, so he's gone. So Man United got some money for him. He was out on loan last season. Now he's gone on a permanent transfer. But yeah, so let's focus on obviously the two youngsters that they brought in, because those are the big acquisitions. And maybe you can say those are the only players that they brought in, but they are looking to bring in a couple more players, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But let's start off with Joshua Zirkzee. Young, raw centre forward. Again, Man United fans seem to be hyping up, both these players that have come in beyond what they currently are. But again, I don't blame them, because every single fan base hypes up every signing that they have to be greater than. As I said, he's raw, he's young, which scares me if I was a Man United fan, because of what I spoke about before the break. Man United aren't the greatest at developing players. They've already got a young, raw striker in their squad. Do they need two? Are you really going to risk it with two young, raw strikers in your squad? That's brave. That's very brave, in my opinion. I mean, they're obviously going to be competing for that starting position, in my opinion. Obviously, Rasmus Højlund is who I'm talking about. He changed his number heading into next season, putting a bit of pressure on himself there, but I'm sure he relishes that challenge. But yeah, so between him and Zirkzee, I don't think that they're players that Man United can rely on in a title challenge. I think they're players that Man United could rely on if they're on the fringes of making top four, because they're going to be inconsistent. They're young players, as I mentioned, they're raw players. They're going to be inconsistent throughout the season. They're not players that are going to be scoring 15 to 20 league goals in a season. It's just not going to happen, unfortunately, for those players. And obviously, you hope that will be the case, but reality is it's really not going to be that way, is it? I mean, you look at the 30 games that Højlund played last season. He scored 10 league goals. So you're asking him to almost double that in one season. I don't see that happening. And then obviously you look at young Joshua Zirkzee. He comes in from Bologna, obviously in Syria. He had 13 league goals in the 7 games that he's played throughout his career there. So then that begs the question, would he be able to do it in one season or not? I mean, last season alone, just looking at his numbers in Serie A, he played 34 games, got 11 goals. So again, very similar to what Højlund was doing. And I think combined, they can get to the above 20 goals. But as individuals, I don't see them being that. And it's not just them that have that issue. Liverpool have that issue with Darwin Núñez, for example. He's not yet at that level of being a 20-goal-a-season striker. And if you want to be challenging for the title, it's really hard to keep up with Man City if you don't have that player already there, as Arsenal found out to their detriment last season. You may fall away. Unless you just bin the cups really early on and just focus on the league, then maybe, you would have enough. But I don't think that they are the answers for Man United from an attacking position yet. They could develop them into the answers, but again, with my worries about Man United and developing players to be consistent elite players week in and week out, that's all I'll say on that one. So obviously he comes in. Another player that comes in, Lenny Yoro, 18 years old. As I said, young centre-back. Really, really highly rated prospect. But again, he's a prospect. He's not the finished product. Will he give you similar or better performances than what we saw from a really old, dare I say, unmotivated Rafael Varane? Maybe slightly below that. We'll see how he adjusts to the physicality of the Premier League. But again, I think it's unfair if Man United's plan is that they're heading into next season and Lenny Yoro has to be one of their starting centre-backs. I think that's unfair on the kid because I don't think he's ready for that. I don't think he's ready for that level of scrutiny, in my opinion. I think the smarter play would have been to have not a Rafa Varane because he's like 900 years old and as I said, you worry about the motivation levels. But if Man United had a more experienced defender that's going to play the majority of the games next season, and you're sort of ushering in Lenny Yoro as your third or fourth choice centre-back, and he gets sprinkled in, every now and then, and you develop him that way, I think that would be a better situation for him. And as I said with Yoro, we all know he wanted to go to Real Madrid. The notion that he Man United got him ahead of Real Madrid is just nonsense. The reality of the situation was he wanted to go to Real Madrid. Real Madrid couldn't afford him this season. They told him to wait until next season. He said, I'll wait. I don't mind. I'll wait. I'll play at Lille for another year and then I'll go to Real Madrid. Lille turned around and said, we want that money in now. We want to cash in on you right now. You either leave now or we're not going to play you. And then you look around and the only team that's willing to pay him right now is Man United. And go look at the transfer fees Man United spent from an agency standpoint, and you'll realize why it was beneficial from an agency perspective for him to go to Man United. So yeah, yes, he's uber talented from a potential perspective. He's got the potential to be really, really special. Under the development capabilities of Man United, I worry for him. Hopefully, for Man United fans' sake, they prove me wrong and they're able to actually develop a player that can play consistently week in, week out at an elite level and not just in patches. But yeah, so far Man United have done 2 young, raw players that aren't ready to help them or facilitate them making a title challenge next year for the price of about £100 million. This is the kind of spending that I'm talking about. And then Man United fans will turn around and say the Glazers do not support the managers. They've just spent £100 million on 2 players that are not going to help them for at least the next 2, if not 3 years from a winning a title perspective. Now, I get investing in the future. I get investing in, the long-term project. I get bringing in young, exciting talents. But at those prices, you are expected to be delivering. And I don't think that £100 million for these 2 players is fair on them. I don't think it's a fair price for those players in any case. I think Man United have overpaid in terms of what would be a fair price for either of those players. But the issue for Man United is they don't help them now. And they're going to turn around in the middle of the season and they're going to start complaining about where they are on the league table and look at how much money it has, and the fact that the owner, that the manager hasn't been backed because he doesn't have options on the bench or whatever. And people are going to turn around and say, well, there was 100 million. You could have probably used that a lot better. We've seen teams this very window use 100 million a lot better than Man United have. But again, if it is Man United's stance that it's understood that these are long-term signings, they're not going to help us achieve our goals this season. If our goal is to go for the title, or make a title challenge. They're not going to help us do that this season because they're not good enough yet to be in that conversation, to have an influence on that conversation. If it's to make top 4, again, I don't think that they're at that level. If it's to challenge to be in the conversation for European football, okay, now we're starting to get into the waters where these players could have an impact and help facilitate that for Man United. But I will say this, is that the goal for Man United this season? Is that what Man United's aims and aspirations are for this season? If you're a Man United fan today and we told you you're going to be fighting for 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, like you did last season, with an outside chance of 4th if someone messes up, are you going to be happy with that? Are you going to take that? Are you going to accept that? I'm curious. I doubt Man United fans think like that. Certainly not the ones that I interact with. So again, that's going to be something interesting to see whether or not Man United fans are going to be happy with that. Now, let's move on to some of the rumors of players that Man United have been looking at. Obviously, they still need to address the right-back situation. It looks like Wan-Bissaka is on the way to West Ham, and they're looking to bring in Mazraoui from Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich are open to letting him go. Whether or not those deals come to fruition, we'll wait and see, but it seems like Man United are certainly in the market for a right-back and are happy for Wan-Bissaka to leave. The interesting thing for me is we've seen Pep do it, we've seen Mikel Arteta do it, and obviously there's not only one way to play football, but at the moment the two teams that are 1 and 2 in the league are playing with effectively 3, if not 4 centre-backs, where their wing-backs are more defensive-minded. So Man United getting rid of their defensive-minded wing-back is quite interesting and looking to go for a more attacking one, especially when you've already got Shaw on the left-hand side, who isn't the greatest defensively, but is pretty good going forward when he's healthy and fully fit and all of that good stuff. So that's an interesting one. No judgment here. As I said, there's different ways to win things. I just find that quite interesting that Man United are going the opposite way of what the top teams in the league are currently doing. Another area of issue for Man United is that central midfield area. It's been an issue for years. Can Man United actually sort out their midfield? Please, Man United fans are begging. I'm sure they're begging. Everyone else is happy with their midfield. Keep doing what you're doing. But Man United need to address their midfield. The defensive midfield situation needs to be addressed. They need someone that can protect that back line. Certainly, if you're going to be playing an 18-year-old Euro, you definitely need someone that's going to sit in front of him, shield him, protect him, talk him through some games if the centre-back isn't going to do it. But they definitely need a leader now as a defensive midfielder because of how young they're going at the back, in my opinion. And obviously, if you look at Man United in terms of who could partner him, Lisandro Martinez, he's not really much of a talker. So who's going to lead the back line? That's going to be one that's going to be interesting to see. We'll see. And when I say he's not a talker, I mean in the sense of marshalling the defensive line, marshalling the defenders, and being the general of that defensive line. I don't know if Martinez is that guy. If is he that dude? We will find out, I guess, if he's the one that's going to play there next to Euro, if that is the plan, that Euro is going to be the number 1 or 2 centre-back in their team. As I said, for me, he needs to be at best case scenario for Euro would be 3rd choice, but ideally he should be the 4th choice centre-back at your team right now, and allow him to develop, and then we'll see whether or not he does develop into the player that everyone's hoping for him to develop into. So yeah, midfield is a huge thing for Man United. Again, it becomes even bigger if they do let go of a guy like Scott McTominay, who has been rumoured to be leaving. Obviously, there are a few clubs like Fulham that have been interested in him. I believe Fulham have been rebuffed with some of their efforts to sign him. But if a Man United do end up selling a Scott McTominay, he's a player that's played pretty decent in their mid. Of all the midfielders and the struggles they've had in midfield, he's played pretty decent. Is it a situation where Man United throw Kobe Mainoo into in there and say he has to be, starting week in, week out? Again, from a developmental perspective, is that wise to have him starting, to say you're in the starting midfield? No one's denying the talent of the kid. But you've got to protect these players. You've got to develop them in stages. You can't just increase his minutes to starting week in, week out for Man United. They're going to break him. And it's going to be frustrating for, one, football fans that enjoy watching good players and young, talented players. And two, for Man United fans, if they break their player. It's just baffling. He needs to, again, be third choice, fourth choice midfielder. It's not to say he's not talented enough to start. It's about having restraint. It's about knowing how to stagnate that or how to stage the development of a player so that you have them for the next 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 years in your midfield. You want a Kobe Mainoo to become a Luka Modric, but make him a one-club Luka Modric, where he doesn't leave a Tottenham and go to Real Madrid, but is still playing and impacting games well into his 30s. That's what you'd hope if you're a Man United fan, surely. But again, if you do it too early, you don't want a Jack Wilshere player. You don't want to play them too soon. Oh, Man United. You can tell I have a lot of opinions when it comes to them. But yeah, so midfield needs to be something that they need to address. As I said, I don't think Kobe Mainoo is the answer to him being one of the starters there, not because of the talent. I'm not saying he's not talented enough to do it. I'm saying from a developmental perspective, it's not fair to put him in there as the starter. He needs to develop a lot slower than that so that you have him for a longer period of time. And again, some people will say if he's good enough, it doesn't matter how old he is. I would say, okay, that's fine. But then don't complain if he doesn't have the longevity that you would have been hoping for him later down the year. And sometimes some managers are willing to take that gamble because they're not going to be here, for those later years when he no longer can perform at the high level. So for them, it makes sense to play him because I'm trying to save my job. And Erik ten Hag is probably one of those managers that is on one of the hottest seats in the Premier League, despite him renewing his contract, just because of the drama we saw leading up to the FA Cup final and after the FA Cup final. It took a good while before they announced that he had signed an extension. Man United obviously looking at the likes of Manuel Ugarte. That's a smart signing. We'll see whether or not they can do that. But Man United, we've seen, are also still interested in centre-backs like De Ligt, we saw the saga that was with Branthwaite, and it seems like he's staying at Everton for another season. But hopefully, this is why I keep saying I hope Man United are turning the corner for the sake of their fans, because if that is the case and they're bringing in other centre-backs to drop Euro deeper into the depth chart, then that's a better situation for him. But again, can you justify spending what they were spending for him and say, yeah, he's the fourth choice? Yeah, I'm spending 60 million on my fourth choice centre-back. Not many clubs can do that. Which is why I was saying Man United are a financial powerhouse. If they could just sort out the way that their squad plan, they would really be a force in the Premier League. So midfield, they need to sort that out. Specifically a defensive midfielder to help plug the holes from some of the goals that they were conceding. They need to bring in another centre-back so they can drop Euro deeper into the depth chart. They've obviously made their decision up front by bringing in Joshua Zirkzee. Now they've got two young, raw talents. We'll see whether or not they can develop them. That's an interesting way to go. They still need a right winger, in my opinion. I don't think Anthony's the answer. Again, a player that's not consistent. Jadon Sancho prefers playing on the left anyway, so I don't know if he can, even if he does revive his career at Man United, if he can be a solution on the right-hand side. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that right-hand side of the pitch, whether or not they do end up going and signing someone. I can't really see. I mean, they were flirting with Michael Olise early in the window, but obviously he then goes and chooses Bayern Munich. Apart from that, they've not really been pushing for a right winger. I mean, Dan Doye, okay. That's all I can say on that one. But they've not really been going for maybe a more solid player to come in and be a starter on that right wing, which I think for me is still concerning. I think they still need to address that. But yeah, if they can address those positions, I do think that they're starting to turn things around in the right way. Obviously, a huge thing for them is the wages. It will be interesting to see any players that come in, what wages they come in on, whether or not they complain about the wages that they're coming in on. We know that Man United players get paid a lot when it comes to base salary, and that's part of the problem. Look at the money that Rashford's on. For the level of inconsistency that he has, he shouldn't be at that amount of money. But hey, I'm happy for Rashford. Go get your money. If you can get your money, go get your money. As I said during the Liverpool podcast, I'm pro player. I'm more pro player than I am pro club when it comes to these type of things. So whenever a player gets their bag, I'm always super happy for them, irrespective of where they're playing. I'm very much in the pro player camp, and I don't apologize for that. So for Man United, what does that leave them in terms of what can they achieve going forward? If they do go and sign another centre-back that comes in and starts, I guess, maybe next to the Argentinian, or the Argentinian butcher, the Sandro Martinez. You can tell I really rate Martinez as one of the best centre-backs in the Premier. No, I don't. I do not. But yeah, it will be interesting to see if they can bring in a centre-back that can push Euro down in the depth chart. It will be interesting if they can bring in a starting defensive midfielder for a bit of protection there. It will be interesting if they can bring in a right winger to come and start ahead of an Antony, for example. Now, if they can do all that, then I do think they put themselves in a better position to challenge for top four. Obviously, they're going to be in Europa next season, so you'd assume they'll use their squad depth a lot more in that competition in the early stages, and then they can always rely on some of their more recognized names later on in the tournament. They should, emphasis on should, be good enough to navigate the group stages without deploying all of their big stars. So that will give them a bit of a break. Whereas in the Champions League, they had to play their big stars because it's the Champions League. And then they also had to play their big stars in the Premier League, and it was just spreading them way too thin. And they didn't have a squad that was capable of doing that and challenging on all fronts. And obviously they went deep in the Carabao Cup. They went deep in the FA Cup by ending up winning it. I don't think that helped them in the league side of things. But if I'm a Man United fan, I guess I would argue, well, we knew we weren't going to win the league, so let's go win a trophy. And that's what they did. So fair play to them there. I'm on board with that argument. I can understand that argument. I can appreciate that argument and that line of thinking. But for next season, I think Man United's focus is trying to get back into the Champions League, and then the season of, and then I think Man United need at least another 2 seasons after that to keep getting back into the Champions League, because it's really competitive. Those places are really competitive nowadays. If they can do 3 seasons of being, okay, now we're established Champions League team, we make it year in, year out, then they can maybe start looking to see what they can do from a title perspective. But I think Man United are at least 4 years away from being proper, legitimate title challengers. But the beauty for Man United fans is, with the financial power Man United have, they can always accelerate that window if they do it right. Whether or not they'll do it right, I have my questions. But that is going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. Guys, go and check out all of the content on the EPL Index website. We have match previews, post-match reviews, player performances, all the news you guys could wish for during this preseason, what is happening in and around the different camps during preseason, all the transfer news you guys could wish for. There's the transfer daily updates that go out which really give you a nice roundup of what the transfer news is on a daily basis. Go and check out the Two Footer podcast with Dave Hendrick. He obviously runs that throughout the week, where he's discussing the hottest topics within football. Also, guys, go and follow at A Tad Predictable on Twitter. Go and follow at EPL Index on Twitter. Subscribe to EPL Index on your podcast channel or your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars, write positive comments. That stuff really, really does help us out, and we do appreciate you guys doing that. I've been Tadiwa Chanakira. You can find me on the Twitter handle at TadPredict. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA, and Jody, she's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle, he's at Guy Drinkle. From myself and the crew, remember, Chisingaperi, Chinoshura.
Salah, oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne! And it is Ward Prowse. Martinelli, gorgeous! Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Sports Social Podcast Network.